I should have known it was coming. That sinking feeling, the way my stomach churned when my phone buzzed late at night. I could never quite shake the feeling that the text from my father, just 2 words, asterisk, I need help, asterisk, would be the beginning of everything unraveling. I should have ignored it. I should have known better. But no, I responded. And I'll never forget the way his voice sounded when I called him back. Hey, Dad, what's going on? I asked, trying to sound casual, as if nothing was wrong. His voice cracked, and I felt my chest tighten. Listen, son, this isn't easy, but I've gotten into some serious trouble. I could hear the weight of his words, the panic that slipped through the cracks of his calm facade. My mind immediately raced. Had something happened to him? Was he in some kind of physical danger? Was he sick? All sorts of scenarios played out in my head, and none of them prepared me for what came next. I've been doing some things, son. Things I shouldn't have. I got involved with some bad people, and now they're coming after me. My heart skipped a beat. Bad people? What the hell is he talking about? Dad, what are you talking about? Who are these people? He sighed heavily, and for the first time in my life, I heard him hesitate. My father was never one to back down or get scared. He always had an answer, always knew what to do, and now he was stumbling over his words. I can't explain it all right now, but the bills are piling up, and I need you to help me. A lump formed in my throat. I knew what he meant. I could feel it in my gut. He needed money, but not just a few $100s like the times before. No, this was bigger, a lot bigger. I could hear it in his voice, the desperation. How much, Dad? I asked, already bracing myself for the worst. It's around 30,000. I almost dropped my phone. 30,000? This wasn't just a little bump in the road. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a quick transfer or a loan from the bank. 30,000? That was more than my entire savings, more than everything I had built. And that's when the doubts started creeping in, making their way into the back of my mind. Was this real? Or was it another one of his endless requests? I can't just give you that, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out shaking. You know how much I've been struggling with my own business. I'm just starting to make ends meet here. I know, he interrupted, and I could hear the guilt in his tone, but it wasn't enough to stop him. But this is different. I've been trying to fix things. But if I don't get this money, everything's going to fall apart. You have to understand, son. There was again the guilt. The way he always manipulated me into believing that I was the only one who could save him, the only one who could help him stay afloat. It wasn't the first time he'd come to me like this, but this felt different. There was something in his voice that made me uneasy, something that I couldn't quite place, like he was hiding something. But of course, I had no choice. He was my father. What was I supposed to do? Tell him no? I couldn't live with myself if I did. Okay, I said, the words coming out before I had a chance to think about them. I'll help you, but I don't have that kind of money right now. I'll have to borrow it or maybe sell some things. No, that's not going to work, he said quickly, almost cutting me off. I need you to sell your business. I froze. Sell my business? The one thing that I had spent the last few years building up from nothing? The one thing that finally gave me a sense of security, of independence? The one thing that was mine, that I had fought so hard for? Dad, I can't do that. This business is everything to me. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. You have to sell it, son. I don't have time. This is the only way. Trust me. I was shaking now, my hands cold as I held the phone to my ear. The thought of losing everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for, felt like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to argue, to fight back, but the words wouldn't come. There was something about the finality in his voice, something that made it feel like there was no way out. This wasn't a request anymore. It was a demand. Dad, this is crazy, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. You're asking me to destroy everything I've worked for. I can't just. I've done worse for you. He cut me off, his voice suddenly hard. I gave up everything to raise you. Now, it's your turn to give up something for me. You owe me this, son. And that's when I realized I didn't know who this man was anymore. The father I had once admired, the man who taught me to be strong, to stand on my own, was gone. In his place was a stranger who didn't care about the sacrifices I had made, about the dreams I had built. All he cared about was his own survival. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. I had no choice but to say yes. I didn't know how I was going to make it happen, didn't know how I was going to give up everything for him, but I did it anyway. And just like that, my life was no longer my own. It was his, and I had no idea where it would take me next. I don't know what I expected after that phone call, but I definitely didn't expect to feel so empty. I didn't even sleep that night. I sat there in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. The decision I'd made felt like a weight on my chest. The business, my dream gone. And for what? To help my father, the same man who had always told me that life was about standing on your own, that you don't depend on anyone for anything. Now, he was asking me to destroy everything I had built, to sell it all, just so he could survive his own mistakes. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, but at that moment, there was no turning back. I had already agreed to it. The next morning, I found myself sitting in front of the computer, staring at my business account. The website I had created, the clients who had trusted me, the months of sleepless nights I had put into making this business work. All of it was flashing before my eyes like a cruel joke. I was supposed to sell this. And as much as I hated the idea, I knew I had no choice. I couldn't just walk away from my father, the man who raised me, the man who had always taught me to be strong, to be the one people could rely on. But now, I was the one being relied upon, and it felt like I was drowning in it. I spent hours calculating everything. How much I had put into the business, how much I could realistically sell it for, and how much my father needed. It didn't take long to realize that selling my business wasn't going to be enough. It wouldn't cover all of his debts. My heart sank as I realized that even if I did manage to sell it, it still wouldn't be enough to fix everything he had gotten himself into. It was like trying to fill an endless pit with a handful of sand. I had no idea what he'd been involved in, what kind of trouble he was in, but it didn't matter. I knew that I couldn't keep asking him questions. Whenever I tried to dig deeper, he'd get defensive, change the subject, or just flat out ignore me. I hated that feeling, the sense that something was being hidden from me. I had trusted him all my life, but now I was starting to feel like there was something else going on, something I didn't understand, something I didn't want to understand. But there was nothing I could do. He was my father, and I wasn't about to abandon him. I started contacting potential buyers. There was no time to waste. If I didn't sell fast, the situation would get even worse. I didn't know who I was trying to fool, though. It was already bad. My business was in its infancy, and even if it had been well established, it still wouldn't have been worth enough to fix my father's mess. The thought of handing over something that had cost me everything felt like I was letting go of my identity. But what other choice did I have? By the end of the week, I had lined up a few serious offers. None of them were what I had hoped for. Not even close. One buyer offered me a fraction of what my business was worth. And when I tried to negotiate, he just walked away. Another one seemed interested, but wasn't willing to go above a lowball offer, even though I was desperate. I realized that no matter how much I tried, I was never going to get the kind of money my father needed. He had pushed me into a corner, and now I was trapped. I couldn't see a way out. I was already exhausted, mentally and physically, but I kept pushing forward. It was all I could do. I didn't even tell anyone what was going on, not even my closest friends. What would I say? That my father had manipulated me into selling everything I had worked for? That he had somehow made me feel like I had no choice but to give up everything for him? I couldn't even tell myself the truth. It felt like a betrayal, not just to me, but to everything I had believed in. Then one day, as I was sitting in my office, staring at a pile of documents, the phone rang. It was him, my father. I hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Hello," I said, trying to sound calm, though I could feel the tension in my chest. "Son, I need you to send me the money now. The creditors are getting worse, and they're threatening to take everything. I don't have much time left." His voice was tight, frantic. I rubbed my eyes. "Dad, I'm trying. I've got offers for the business, but they're not enough. I'm telling you, I don't think I can do this. It's not going to work." "What do you mean it's not going to work? You have to make it work. I'm counting on you." His voice cracked again, and I could hear the fear, the panic. It hit me like a wave, knocking all sense of reason out of my head. "I can't sell for that low, Dad. It's just not enough." I felt my frustration boiling over. "You're asking me to throw away my life's work, my future, for something that's not even going to solve your problems. He was quiet for a moment, and I could tell he was thinking. You don't understand, son. You don't get it. I've already lost everything. If I don't get this money, they're going to come after me. They'll ruin everything. Who? Who are these people? I demanded, feeling my frustration grow. I wanted answers. I needed them. But once again, he refused to give me a straight answer. I can't explain right now. I just need you to help me. Please, son, do this for me. This is the last time. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. The last time? I echoed, my voice rising. How many times have you said that to me, Dad? How many times have you promised me that this would be the last time? His silence was deafening. For a moment, I thought he was going to hang up. But then he spoke again, in a voice so quiet I could barely hear it. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what else to do. And in that moment, something shifted in me. The anger, the guilt, the frustration, it all boiled over, and I realized something. He wasn't just asking for help anymore. He was asking me to fix his mistakes, to take responsibility for the mess he had made. And I wasn't sure if I could do that anymore. You've got to stop depending on me, Dad, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I can't keep doing this. You need to figure this out yourself. I can't keep sacrificing my future for yours. And for the first time in my life, I heard him say something I wasn't expecting. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. I don't know how to fix anything anymore. And just like that, the conversation ended. It felt like I was living in someone else's life. I couldn't understand how everything had come to this, how I had gotten here. My father's words echoed in my head for days after that phone call. I don't know how to fix this. I wasn't sure if he was just trying to make me feel guilty or if he really believed he was incapable of turning things around. I didn't know which one was worse. The more I thought about it, the more everything started to crumble. It wasn't just his debts anymore. It was this feeling, this suffocating thought that he had always depended on me, and now, in his time of need, he was pulling me down with him. I felt like a failure. I had spent my entire life trying to get away from the shadows of his mistakes, but here I was, knee-deep in them, and I didn't know how to climb out. The next few days were filled with tension. My phone didn't stop ringing. I kept getting calls from potential buyers for my business, and every time they asked for more details or made an offer, I felt like I was dying inside. Each conversation felt like another piece of me was being sold away, and with every dollar that slipped through my fingers, I realized how much I was losing. Not just my business, but my confidence, my sense of self. I had worked so hard to get to where I was, to build something of my own, and now, in a matter of days, I was going to give it all up just to save a man who didn't even know how to ask for help. By the third day after that call, I was barely sleeping. I couldn't focus on anything. Every time I sat down at my desk, I found myself staring at the documents and emails in front of me, but my mind wouldn't process any of it. The only thing I could think about was my father and the mess he had gotten himself into. I tried to tell myself that I had made the right choice, that I was doing what I had to do, but deep down, I felt betrayed. Not just by him, but by myself. I kept asking myself why I couldn't just walk away from this. Why couldn't I just stop everything and refuse to help him? The guilt, though, kept me chained to this decision. I couldn't abandon him, not when he had already asked so much. And then the knock came. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't prepared for it. But when I opened the door, there he was, my father, standing in the hallway, looking older, more tired than I had ever seen him. I don't know what I had imagined when I thought about him, but this wasn't it. He didn't look like the man who had raised me. He looked like someone who had been fighting a losing battle for far too long. Dad, I said, my voice tight with surprise. I stepped back, almost instinctively, as though I wanted to put some space between us. What are you doing here? He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at me like he was trying to figure out if he should say something, if he should come inside. I waited for him to speak, but the silence between us grew heavy, like it was suffocating us both. Finally, he cleared his throat and took a small step forward. I needed to see you, he said quietly. I need to explain, to make you understand. I didn't know what to say to that. I had heard the same excuses over and over again, and part of me didn't want to hear them anymore. But part of me also wanted to know what was really going on. I hadn't been able to get any answers before, and maybe this time, just maybe, he would tell me the truth. I stepped aside, letting him in. All right, I said, more to myself than to him. Explain. He walked past me and sat down at the kitchen table, looking around like he was seeing the place for the first time. His hands were shaking slightly, and for a moment, I thought he might break down right there. But he didn't. He just looked at the table, then back at me, as if gathering his thoughts before speaking. I never wanted you to be a part of all this, he began, his voice rough. I didn't want to drag you into it. But it's too late for that now. I stood by the counter, arms crossed, trying to keep my distance. I didn't know if I could handle hearing more of his lies, more of his excuses. But I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. I got into some bad business deals. Not just one, but a series of bad ones. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could turn things around. But I was wrong. And I kept making the same mistakes, thinking I could fix them on my own. His voice trailed off, and for a moment, I thought he might stop there. But he didn't. I didn't want to admit it to you. I didn't want you to think less of me. I've spent my whole life trying to show you that I had it together, that I knew what I was doing. But the truth is I didn't. I don't. I never have. The words hit me harder than I expected. I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. This wasn't the father I had known. This wasn't the man who had always seemed so certain of everything, so confident. This was someone broken, someone who had been trying to keep up appearances for so long that even he had started to believe them. I got involved with the wrong people, son, he continued, his voice softer now. They were supposed to help me, but they just made things worse. I kept hoping things would get better, that I could fix it on my own, but I was too far gone. And when it all started to fall apart, I didn't know who to turn to. So I turned to you. I thought if I asked for help, maybe I could fix it, but I'm realizing now that I was wrong. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. I shouldn't have put that burden on you. I felt a mixture of anger and sorrow welling up inside me. He was sorry, but was he really sorry for what he had done? Or was he just sorry that he had gotten caught? Was he apologizing because he realized what he had done to me? Or was it just because things were starting to spiral out of control? I didn't know. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. I've ruined everything, he whispered, almost to himself. I don't know how to fix it anymore. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, and I fought to keep them back. I didn't want to feel sorry for him. I didn't want to give in to the guilt that had been eating at me for so long. But in that moment, I saw him for what he was, just a man, broken and lost, trying to hold on to whatever he could. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just his son. I was the one who needed saving. Dad, I started, but my words caught in my throat. What could I say? How could I fix any of this? How could I fix him? He looked up at me, his eyes wide, almost pleading. I don't know what to do, son. I really don't. But I need you to understand something. He paused, his voice breaking. I didn't want to ruin your life. I never wanted to drag you down with me. And in that moment, I realized something that hit me like a punch to the gut. My father had never really known how to be a father to me. He had never really understood what it meant to support me, to help me, to give me the things I needed, not just the things I wanted. All he had ever done was take, and I had let him. I need you to fix this, he said again, his voice full of desperation. I need you to help me one last time. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond to him. His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I need you to fix this, he had said, but how could I fix something that was beyond repair? How could I keep sacrificing my life for a man who had never really known how to be a father to me? The more I thought about it, the more the resentment bubbled up inside me. He had always depended on me, and now, when I needed him the most, he was asking me to destroy my own future to save him. I stood there, staring at him, unable to process the mix of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, guilt, frustration, sorrow, they were all tangled together, and I didn't know how to untangle them. He was sitting in front of me, asking me to do the impossible, but I knew deep down that I couldn't keep going down this path. I couldn't keep sacrificing everything I had worked for. But how could I walk away from him? How could I just let him drown in his mistakes, knowing that I was the only one who could save him? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I spoke, my voice trembling. I can't do this anymore, Dad. I can't keep carrying your weight. I've given you everything I have, and it's still not enough. You keep asking me for more, but you never give anything back. You've been asking me to fix your mistakes for as long as I can remember, and I'm just I am tired. I can't keep doing this. I need to live my own life. His face hardened, the sadness in his eyes shifting to something else, something darker, something I hadn't seen before. You think I don't know that? He spat, his voice rising. You think I don't know that I've been dragging you down with me? Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted you to have to give up everything for me? I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be in this position, but here we are. And you're telling me you can't help me one more time? Just one more time. His words struck me like a slap to the face. It hurt to hear him speak like that, as if everything was still my fault, as if I was the one who had caused this mess. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him everything I had been holding in for so long, but I didn't. I couldn't, because despite everything, despite the anger and the betrayal, I still loved him. And maybe that was the problem. I'm not asking you to fix everything for me, he said, his voice softer now, but the edge was still there. I'm not asking you to take over my life. I'm asking you to help me get out of this hole. Just this once. After that, I'll leave you alone. I'll figure it out on my own. But I need this, son. I need you to be there for me. Just this once. I could feel my resolve weakening. I wanted to say no. I wanted to walk away and never look back. But I couldn't. I knew I couldn't. The guilt was already crushing me, and the thought of walking away from him, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions alone, was something I couldn't bear. I didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but I knew it was bad, and I knew that without me, he was going to sink even deeper. I can't sell the business for you, Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't give you everything I've worked for, but I'll help you in any other way I can. I'll do what I can, but I can't destroy everything I've built. I can't. There was a long silence, and for a moment, I thought he might get up and walk out, angry and disappointed. But he didn't. He sat there, staring at the table, his hands trembling. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel the weight of his disappointment. I could feel the crushing pressure of his expectations. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. I don't know what else to do, son. I've screwed up so many times that I've lost count. I've lied. I've made